Hi everyone, this is Michael Hoffman at C3 Communications, and we're here for another hangout to talk about important issues related to nonprofits, social causes. And I'm thrilled today to have Mitch Hurst, who's a friend, a colleague. We've done work together with major foundations. We've done work together on early childhood education, and we've always found great opportunities to collaborate. And so, Mitch, welcome, and maybe you can just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you've been thinking about.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Michael. We go way back, and it's great to be able to sit down and actually talk shop with you for a few minutes. And I'm still doing the same thing that I've been doing for, the past 5 years, which is to help nonprofits and grant-making foundations invest wisely in their communications and make important investments and targeted investments in their communications. I'm glad we're talking today because it's come up a number of times with some of my clients in the past few weeks and month about keeping their social media channels up to date and finding a content stream that they can use to over social media to engage with their audience. I think there's some issues around resources and risk taking and all of those kind of things that come with using social media. And I'm just curious, in your experience, as social media continues to evolve and be used, kind of what you're seeing these days along those lines.
Yeah, I think we find the same thing, which is there's so many channels that you have to fill and not enough time and effort and dollars to create enough content for that. And so I think one of the first principles, especially around social media, is the idea of curation, that you cannot be creating everything. You don't have enough budget or time or resources, and you need to be curating. And in fact, if you're the organization that thinks about a certain issue or space, shouldn't you be the one to tell your audience about the interesting things that others are doing in that space? So it has a logic to it, but often organizations worry about sharing things that are not theirs because does it mean it's an endorsement? Does it mean that we like it? Does it mean, what does it mean when we share something? And I think, part of it is making that explicit, being able to say, well, we like this aspect of this program, or see what they're doing. So it's more of a question of fact. So I think that that's one thing we try to get clients comfortable with, and we're dealing with that right now with a group we're working with that's researchers, important research, very rigorous, and so there's a lot of discomfort among researchers around how do you share things that don't have that same research rigor. But if you don't find things to share, then you have nothing to talk about. So we're really trying to thread that needle. And the other, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think also organizations might be surprised at what content they have on hand already, and they haven't actually taken a look at what's there. I remember I worked with one organization a while ago where we pieced together conversations using their email, and it was really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of good content in email. Now, that makes people nervous, so you've got to be careful about how you curate that and how you edit it. But I think that there's more there than organizations realize sometimes.
Absolutely, and there's techniques that go. I think that like when we talk a lot about video, people think they need to do some major video production all the time with live action and people and documentary style, but there's lots of other things, and some of the most interesting things are using graphics, for example, basic motion graphics. We were working on something yesterday that involved the movement of people around the world, and we were thinking about maps, so using maps or using a whiteboard to illustrate something. So there's lots of really interesting techniques that don't necessarily require as much dollars and as much production to illustrate certain points. And I think you're right, it's really about mining what you already know, the people that you already have, the resources you already have, to tell those stories in a compelling way. And, again, finding those techniques that require less from a resource perspective.
I want to get back to your point about curation because I think that's really important. There's so much available out there. Are there some just simple tips that organizations, who are nervous about thinking how to repurpose other people's or other organizations' content, how can they do that wisely and help build their brand, and still do it confidently?
Right. Well, I think we've seen, or like Upworthy, for example, it's gotten
Yeah.
millions of subscribers, 100% on curation, right? They didn't create any content, or at least not until recently, I think that, and they've built that because they've been able to frame that content. So I think that's a key piece of curating, is to frame it, is to saying, well, what are you saying about it? You're not just passing a link over. You're saying, why is it relevant? Why should I care? Summarize it for me. Add some value, to it. But that also, by adding the value, you're also establishing that it's not yours and that you don't take responsibility for everything that's there. So I think it's important not just to share, but to share with that frame, around it.
Right. I mean, we have whole, entire journalism brands online that don't produce any original content. They just figure out, a way to use everybody else's content and organize it in an interesting way.
Well, and I would say this. I know, just to close this conversation, I think really a lot of it's about culture, right? It's not all just about the technical and techniques and what you should do. It's about shifting organizational culture to be more comfortable in this nimble digital age where we are sharing and where the lines blur a bit between what's yours, what's your channel, how all that works.
Yeah, and the whole idea of endorsement and what do all these things mean? But yeah, I think together our mission can be to try to help organizations get past some of those types of reservations that they have, and realizing that you've got to take risks in this space if you want your your content and your organization to be noticed.
Yeah, and I think that's your role as a consultant, and our role when we work with organizations, it's as much about how do we create the processes and the vision and help them internally move their culture to feel comfortable with these things and set up the safeguards so that they should feel comfortable with them. And
Yeah.
that's often something that insiders understand but aren't able necessarily to execute on without help from folks like us.
Yeah, agitators.
That's a good way to put it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Mitch, and I hope we get a chance to work together and to talk more about these really important and interesting issues.
Thanks a lot. It was fun, and congrats on the new offices.
Thank you. Bye.